My ex-wife, whom I cut off all contact with 12 years ago, suddenly reached out after hearing my father was dying. I thought she wanted to apologize. Instead, she smiled and said, "Meet my new husband, handsome, rich, and romantic." But her face turned pale when her husband looked at me and said, "Oh, that's our CEO. My name is Daniel, and I'm 42 years old. Life has been a series of ups and downs, but nothing prepared me for the twist that was about to unfold." After 12 years of silence, my ex-wife Sarah suddenly reached out to me. The news of my father's terminal illness had spread, and I assumed she wanted to make amends, to perhaps find closure or offer some form of support during this difficult time. Sarah and I had parted ways on less than amicable terms, with both of us harboring unresolved feelings. She had moved on, or so I thought, and I had built a life, for myself, becoming the CEO of a successful tech company. My father, Richard, was a pillar in my life, and his impending departure was a heavy burden to bear alone. As I sat in my office, the phone rang, displaying Sarah's name. My heart skipped, a beat not from affection but from the unexpectedness of her call. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button, the weight of our past hanging in the air like a thick fog. What could Sarah possibly want after all these years? The last time I saw her, she was walking out of our home, her eyes filled with tears, her voice laced with accusations and heartbreak. We had shared a life, dreams, and even a bed, but our love had turned into something unrecognizable, something that left scars. I picked up the phone, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. "Sarah," I said, the name feeling foreign, on my tongue after so long. "Daniel," she replied, her voice a mix of hesitation and urgency. "I heard about your father." The day was unusually warm for early spring when I decided to meet Sarah at a quaint cafe we used to frequent in our younger days. The place hadn't changed much, still holding on to the charm of yesteryears. I arrived first, choosing a table, near the window watching the world go by, lost in thoughts of the past. When Sarah walked in, she looked different, more polished, with an air of confidence that was new to me. She was accompanied by a man, tall with a sharp suit and an even sharper smile. They approached, and Sarah introduced him as Mark, her new husband. "Daniel, this is Mark. He's handsome, rich, and incredibly romantic," she said with a smugness that felt like a jab. Mark extended his hand, his grip firm, his eyes scanning me with a mix of curiosity and something else I couldn't quite place. I shook his hand, feeling the weight of his gaze. "Nice to meet you, Mark," I managed, though my mind was racing. Why? Did Mark's gaze linger on me with such intensity? There was something about his eyes, a flicker of recognition or perhaps a challenge. Sarah sat down, smoothing her dress, her demeanor suggesting she had moved on in ways I hadn't anticipated. "I wanted to see how you were holding up with your father's illness," she said, her voice softening, but her eyes remained sharp, calculating. I nodded, appreciating the sentiment but wary of her intentions. "It's tough," I admitted, "but we're managing." Mark leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving me. "Sarah has told me a lot about you, Daniel. It's interesting to finally meet someone she speaks so highly of," he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. The conversation shifted as Sarah began to recount their recent trip to Italy, where Mark had proposed in the most romantic setting imaginable. She described the vineyard, the sunset, and how Mark had gone down on one knee, the ring sparkling in the fading light. I listened, trying to muster some form of genuine happiness for her, but Mark's eyes kept pulling me back, a silent conversation happening beneath the surface. As Sarah continued to boast about Mark's wealth and their luxurious lifestyle, I noticed Mark's demeanor change. He leaned in, his voice lowering. "Daniel, I must say I've heard a lot about you, but I never expected to meet you like this." Sarah looked puzzled, her confidence faltering. Mark then turned to me, his eyes wide with recognition. "Oh, that's our CEO." The cafe seemed to quiet down, the background noise fading as the weight of Mark's words sank in. Sarah's face turned a shade of pale, her smugness replaced by shock and embarrassment. I cleared my throat, trying to diffuse the tension. Yes, I am the CEO of TechWave, but let's not make this about business, shall we? Mark's expression shifted from surprise to something more calculated. Of course, Daniel. But you must understand, I've been in business long enough to know that every meeting has its purpose. I didn't expect Sarah's ex-husband to be the man at the helm of one of the companies I've been eyeing for acquisition. Sarah's eyes darted between us, her earlier confidence now a distant memory. You're looking to buy Daniel's company? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. It's not personal, Sarah. It's just business. And now, it seems, it's become quite personal. The air thickened with the implications of Mark's revelation. I felt a mix of emotions, betrayal, curiosity, and a strategic interest. Well, Mark, let's keep this meeting informal then. Perhaps we can discuss business another time, under more appropriate circumstances. Mark smiled. The revelation hung in the air like a thick fog. Sarah stammered, trying to regain her composure, but the damage was done. Mark, now visibly uncomfortable, tried to explain. I didn't know, Sarah. I swear, I had no idea he was your ex-husband. I could see the wheels turning in Sarah's head, trying to process how her attempt to flaunt her new life had backfired spectacularly. Meanwhile, I felt a mix of vindication and pity. Here was a man, my employee, who had unknowingly become a pawn in this awkward game. Mark, trying to salvage the situation, suggested we move to a more private setting to discuss this further. We agreed to meet at my office, where the atmosphere was more controlled, and perhaps we could all find some clarity. Once we arrived at my office, the tension was palpable. I closed the door behind us, the click echoing in the silence. Sarah sat down, her eyes darting around, avoiding mine. Mark took a seat, his posture stiff, his usual confidence replaced by an uneasy demeanor. All right, let's get to the bottom of this, I started, my voice calm but firm. Mark, you're looking to acquire TechWave? He nodded, his eyes meeting mine, with a newfound respect. Yes, Daniel, but I assure you my interest in your company was purely professional until today. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment. I had no idea, Daniel. I wouldn't have brought him if I knew. I raised a hand to stop her. It's all right, Sarah. What's done is done. Now, let's focus on what we can do moving forward. Mark leaned forward, his voice earnest. Daniel, I respect what you've built at TechWave. My proposal for acquisition was based on its potential, not on personal connections. However, given the circumstances, I understand if you want to reconsider. I considered his words, the implications of our intertwined personal and professional lives. Mark, let's be clear. Your relationship with Sarah doesn't change the fact that TechWave is a valuable asset. However, this situation complicates things. I need to think about how this affects my company, my employees, and the future we've been working towards. Mark's gaze was steady, his voice carrying a hint of regret. I understand, Daniel. This isn't how I envisioned this meeting going. I had planned to approach you with a straightforward business proposal, not this entanglement. Sarah, now visibly upset, interjected. Daniel, please, this isn't about Mark's job or your company. It's about us, about understanding and moving forward. I looked at Sarah, her eyes pleading for some form of reconciliation or at least understanding. Sarah, I appreciate what you're saying, but the personal and professional lines are now blurred. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about the livelihoods of many people. Mark nodded, his expression somber. I'll resign if that's what you think is best, he offered, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his fear of losing everything he had worked for. I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Mark, your resignation isn't necessary at this point, but we need to handle this with care. I'm not here to make decisions based on personal history, but as your CEO, I must consider the implications of this on our company. The room was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning. Sarah's eyes were now on the floor, her earlier confidence completely eroded by the unfolding drama. Would I let personal history dictate professional decisions? I pondered silently. The answer wasn't straightforward. My mind raced through the potential outcomes, the ethical considerations, and the impact on TechWave. Mark, let's take some time to think this over, I finally said. I'll need to consult with the board, discuss potential conflicts of interest, and ensure that any decision we make is in the best interest of the company. Mark exhaled slowly, relief mixed with resignation. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate your fairness. Sarah reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched my arm. Daniel, I'm sorry for how this has turned out. I thought we could all move past our history. I looked at her. The years of pain, and after a moment of silence, I looked at both of them. Mark, your resignation isn't necessary. Your work has been exemplary, and I won't let personal matters interfere with that. However, we need to establish boundaries. Sarah looked at me, her eyes softening. Thank you, Daniel. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I nodded. I know, Sarah. And maybe in a strange way this has brought some closure. We all need to move forward, not just from this moment, but from our past. Mark extended his hand again, this time with a genuine smile. Thank you, Daniel. I won't let you down. As they left, I sat back in my chair, the weight of the day lifting slightly. Life indeed had a funny way of humbling people, but it also had a way of teaching us about forgiveness, understanding, and the unexpected paths to reconciliation. What would the future hold for Daniel, Sarah, and Mark? The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, discussions, and introspection. I had to navigate the delicate balance between personal history and professional integrity. Mark's proposal to acquire TechWave was still on the table, but now, it was layered with complexities that went beyond mere business strategy. I decided to meet with the board, laying out the situation with transparency. We need to consider the implications of this acquisition, I told them. Mark's relationship with Sarah, my ex-wife, introduces a conflict of interest that we must address. The board was understanding, recognizing the professionalism I had maintained despite the personal entanglement. They agreed to proceed with caution, ensuring that any decision would be in the best interest of TechWave and its employees. Meanwhile, Sarah and I had a few more conversations, not about the past, but about the present and the future. We talked about our lives, our regrets, and our hopes. It was clear that while our romantic relationship was over, a new form of understanding was emerging. She apologized for the unintended drama, and I found myself forgiving her, not just for this incident, but for the unresolved feelings from our past. Mark, on his part, proved his worth by stepping, "Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed the story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you."